we can do it this way, but I'll need that podium because it needs to be a little higher so I can see it. What is it to do?
What about Jeremy? He's got his
Yeah.
camera going too.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. And thank you for coming tonight. The name of the talk is Design Revisited. And this, my good friend, Mr. Randy Bruss, who's here tonight, raise your hand, Randy, and also my daughter is here tonight, and she's the one who did a wonderful job on the PowerPoint, but the PowerPoint is malfunctioning, but I'll tell you, we will get it, what's going on.
Maybe
Okay.
not, but that's okay.
All right, we're going to do the talk anyways, and sorry that we're having all these technical problems. It's called Design Revisited. What's all the whine about design? An update, a response. So, by introducing this, starting way back in the 1980s, there was a number of individuals that, in a sense, were creationists, but they believed that our case could be made that there was a creator because the evidence for design is so dramatic that they thought, well, the creationists have always come out with examples of what they thought was design, but let's get more specific. Let's come out with some incredible evidences of irreducibly complex systems. And so way back, starting in the 1990s, some of you are familiar, raise your hand if you're familiar with Michael Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box. Now, this was way back in the 1990s, and then William Dembski came on board, and a number of other creationists, including guys like Stephen Meyer, who also wrote these tremendous books, Signature in the Cell. Who's heard of that? Signature in the Cell. And also, I wrote a number of other books, but that was the main one connected with design. So back in the 1990s, when these intelligent design proponents were coming out with this, it is connected with creation, but with a little different slant. Okay, what they wanted to do was take more of a precise scientific approach, which I don't have an objection to. I believe, of course, that we should include scripture in our overall apologetic of creation. But what they wanted to do was talk in the public school realm and public arena where it was more scientific evidence for design. So they came out with a number of those books starting in the 1980s, promoted in the 1990s, and then in the early 2000s there was a proliferation of books arguing for that. Now, around 2002-2003, there was a backlash of the evolutionists where the evolutionists were saying, look, this is completely wrong. There is no good examples of intelligent design, and we reject this completely. People like, you know, our friend, I say that loosely, Dawkins, and others, Kenneth Miller, and Daniel Dennett, and even Christopher Hitching, who's passed away recently, all argued in numerous books. Christopher Hitching even wrote a book called, quote, make sure it's in quote, God is not great, okay? And all of these guys came out with these books and they said, look, not only is design not accurate, that's something we see, it can be very easily, according to them, they're wrong, but it can very easily be explained by neo-Darwinism, okay? That neo-Darwinism gave us the appearance of design, okay? And so what happened then is the creationists said, really, and the intelligent design people said, really, well, let's take a look at your arguments and see if they have, you know, responded correctly to what we think is tremendous evidence for intelligent design. So they began to respond and write these books. In the last 5 years or so, there's been a tremendous number of books, DVDs, and articles by intelligent design and creationists that have now completely obliterated, in a sense it was a good thing, the evolutionary model. And in a sense it was a really good thing because what it did for us is it codified our arguments for intelligent design. Michael Behe wrote a second book William Dembski has written several books. Stephen Meyer has written several books. And others within intelligent design have now responded to the evolutionists and thoroughly made their case. Of course, I'll admit my bias, but I'm absolutely convinced not only have they refuted this notion, okay, that intelligent design does not have evidence, but they've gone beyond that because the atheists and evolutionists have said, look, we even see examples of bad design. You say that the creator designed all this, but we see evidence in the literature of bad design. So I took a look at that also, and I'm going to cite 3 examples tonight to see, is what we see in nature really bad design? Now, one thing to keep in mind within the creationist and intelligent design model is this is a fallen world. They don't ever acknowledge that. They say that, look, it should be perfect. Everything should be perfect if there's a creator. But they don't ever open God's Word. They don't ever look at what the Bible clearly explains the state that we're in. Okay? As it says in Romans 1, the creation suffers unto this day because it's a fallen world and a fallen universe that we live in. And so, let's take a look at these different arguments and these different models to see if indeed who's correct and who's accurate on this. Okay? And we're going to try plugging this in. So I'm going to just keep talking while you're doing that. And hopefully we'll actually get some actual PowerPoint up in just a minute. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the 2 models considered. And most of you are familiar with this. The evolution model, when it comes to intelligent design or against intelligent design, essentially says that naturalism is the only way to look at things. Another way to say that is scientific methodological materialism, or you could say natural scientific methodology, or you could say methodological naturalism. All of those words and statements apply to the evolutionary model when it comes to design. Only, in this case, only the scientific method can be used to investigate phenomena. Nothing else is considered. Spirituality is something that not only do they not consider, but they reject completely with naturalism. As Carl Sagan said, the universe is all that there is, and there is nothing else. Only naturalistic explanations are considered and published. The evolutionists have made it completely clear they will not publish. Scientific American has said this in print. They will not publish anything that is against the theory of evolution, whether it's creation literature or whether it's intelligent design. They simply will not publish, and then the same people turn right around and criticize creationists for not publishing in the journals. Well, believe me, many have tried, and as soon as you say anything that hints at a creation model or an intelligent design model, it's rejected. Whether it's accurate scientifically or not, it's never even considered. The Slaughter of the Dissonance, written by Dr. Jerry Bergman, has case after case after case. There's 2 volumes of that. Some of you are familiar with that. And of course, many of you are familiar with the recent case and or cases that have happened with Mark Armitage, who not only did not say anything religious and didn't even come to a conclusion when he found soft tissue in a Triceratops horn, but was told straight up, you will not practice your religion at this university, and was fired. And now, if you followed that case, which took many years, Mark sued and actually won in court, one of the few times we've ever seen a Christian or creationist win based on discrimination. Mark, though, is quite a tiger, and he was able to actually pursue that. And you can look on YouTube at that case if you're not familiar with it. And there's all kinds of YouTubes on there. And my understanding, which is limited, but Mark actually got a 6-figure settlement on that because of the discrimination against him. He never said one word about anything, okay? And so what can you say? All right, now we have, I have to apologize, we do have slides now. but the formatting on this is for a Mac, and so some of it is not readable. So the two models considered, we covered point number 1, only the scientific method can be used. We covered point number 2, only naturalistic explanations are considered and published. Point number 3, the scientific method is limited to materialistic explanations because repeated experiments can be done only on material objects and physical forces. Well, no scientist would disagree with that actual statement. So it's not a question of whether that statement is correct, but that doesn't rule out the supernatural. And don't forget, the actual definition of science is a search for knowledge and truth. That's what the word science means, a search for knowledge. It doesn't mean evolutionary materialism. It doesn't mean natural explanations only. It means a search for truth. What is the truth? Now keep in mind that all of our sciences, I don't care what major science you mentioned, physics, chemistry, biology, geology, they were all established by Bible-believing Christians. And the evolutionists know this, okay? They know this, and yet they discriminate against anyone who doesn't assume that evolution is an absolute fact. Okay, let me go ahead and go to the next slide, and even though you can't see the beginning, I can see it on the Mac over here, and so that will help me. I'm using the Mac to actually see the top, which helps us. Okay, so now, the next side of our two models here is intelligent design defined. Okay, now intelligent design, again, would be a little bit different than creationism. I certainly would hold to a creationism view. Intelligent design, though, does not consider the spiritual side of design. It says that there probably is, or could be at least, a supernatural agent. So essentially, point number 1, it is the view that some features of the world, or the universe, it could be anything. Guillermo Gonzalez has done a tremendous amount of work in astronomy demonstrating that the Milky Way galaxy, his argument is very solidly codified that we are located in the Milky Way precisely in a place that we can observe the entire Milky Way galaxy, or at least enough of it to see design. If we were too close to the center, it would be too bright, too many stars. If we were out in the outer portion, there would be too much gas and we wouldn't be able to see the inner portion. So according to him, we are in a location that is well designed for us to view the galaxy that we see. So it's the view that due to an intelligent cause rather than an unguided natural process, the universe exists. And then let's go to the next bullet. The deliberate choice or conscience of intelligent agent or persons to affect a particular outcome or objective, according to Stephen Meyer. Then as we move on, the purposeful arrangement of parts, according to Michael Behe. And finally, let's see what Georgia Purdom from Answers in Genesis, Dr. Purdom, I should say, so you know she knows what she's talking about. Intelligent design can be defined as a theory which holds that certain features of living things are designed by an intelligent cause as opposed to being formed through a particular natural means. Okay, so there is an intelligent agent involved, and you know, we all know what those kinds of situations look like. So we see on your left a field of flowers. Okay, now look at the one on the right. It is obvious plants do not grow to look like that. Okay, it's a small herd of elephants, and you see this more and more where people having a lot of fun, have their gardeners, cut certain kinds of plants and trees that look very much like organisms. But that doesn't happen in nature. It's obvious, even though done by man, which of these two that we could absolutely infer that design is associated with. So the one on the right, I hope that no one would disagree that that absolutely was done by an intelligent mind. We're not saying it's the creator, but it does demonstrate design. We are able to see and discern nature, when nature does something versus intelligent design. So that's a pretty obvious example. Let's go to yet another example. And here we see on your left, that's really easily discerned. It's just a regular mountain there, which is formed by the processes of Earth. And so, you know, evolutionists might argue, look, time and chance did that, the processes of plate tectonics. You know, okay, we'll give you that. But the one on the right, as we see Mount Rushmore, not only is that an example of an irreducibly complex system, but it's also specified complexity. Every one of us that's been around for a while would recognize these particular individuals, not just human individuals, but particular presidents that have existed in time. So there's specified complexity in that example. So Michael Behe and other of these intelligent design proponents have demonstrated and argued that what we see in nature is irreducibly complex systems. In other words, they can't be broken down like a watch. If I take, you know, a spring from a watch, or I take the hands from a watch, the watch no longer functions. It must have all of the parts together. That's what irreducibly complex systems are. And then it must also, for intelligent design, have a specified complexity like we see here. Nobody, I don't think any evolutionist would agree or maintain that this is certainly not something that is designed. They would say, okay, yes, you make a point, but that's man-made is what they would come back. But you miss the point if you say that, because what we're saying is this is an example of specified complexity. So now the intelligent design movement says that there will be systems. It makes predictions, so that shows you it is science, because science has to make predictions. And that is that there will be systems in nature that are irreducibly complex and have specified complexity. And that's something that we think can be seen in nature. Now, when we look at this, oh great, that slide actually came out kind of nice. Intelligent causes are thought to do what nature cannot do. Okay? Nature doesn't seem to be able to produce these incredibly complex, irreducibly complex systems that have specified complexity. It seems to be that intelligent causes are thought to do what natural causes cannot. For example, produce new information. What we see in systems, based on the neo-Darwinian theory, in mutations are deleterious effects. We do not, Mr. Bruss and I, Randy Bruss, talked about this on the way over here. We do not see genetically where systems become better than they were. Mutations produce negative effects. Now, there are some positive outcomes from a loss of information in some cases. I'll give some examples of that. But that is very different from a mutation that produces new and better information. And after all, the neo-Darwinian theory of evolution is driven by mutations. We'll talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. So new information must be produced. Intelligence does that. Intelligence allows new information into a system. Intelligence was what finally overcame the computers tonight of going from a Mac to a PC, okay? Even though we didn't do it in a perfect way, but hey, we got it going, okay? And it has to be a complex molecular machine that requires all the parts to function as a unit. If parts of the system are taken out, the system does not and cannot function the way it should. This is irreducible complex systems intelligent design, what it predicts. So now we have our two models. We know that things should happen by natural selection and mutation if evolution is true. That's the neo-Darwinian synthesis from the 1940s. It should be correct. We should be able to see that. We should see molecular machines that are coming into existence on a constant basis by this process and this process only of natural selection and mutation. Well, first off, I can't help but mention this being a good paleontologist, my particular field, we do not find intermediates in the fossil record. But evolutionists say, oh, well, that's just some kind of a problem with the fossil record and they just didn't preserve. Really? Well, when we look at the fossil record, the gaps are systematic. This was something Dr. Duane Gish argued hundreds of times in debates, and the evolutionists were never able to answer that because we do not and have not found the intermediates. And the handful of individuals supposedly that are intermediates are poor examples at best and not an example of intermediate forms. So if anyone has a question on that during the question and answer, you can ask me. All right, so we have our two predictions. And one other thing before we actually look at some examples, William Dembski, as he formulated intelligent design in his book called Intelligent Design, written back in the late 1990s, came up with what's called the explanatory filter. Explanatory filter. Oh, there's another good slide. Okay, and the explanatory filter has three parts to it. Okay, so stay with me on this because you'll see where I'm going. Number one, was the event, whatever happened, was it necessary? Did it have to happen? If I put a ball up on the top of a hill and I don't stop it somehow, gravity is going to allow that to roll downhill. Is that design? Well, you could argue it's not. You could argue that gravity is something that's always been there. That's what Stephen Hawking says. If gravity exists, the universe has to come into existence. Okay, well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but let's pretend that it is. So if it necessarily had to happen, wipe it out. It's not intelligent design. Point number two, did it happen by chance? Was there some kind of an accident? And if so, if there was an accident, then that happened just by random chance, and it can be ruled out, and it's not intelligent design. But if neither of those can be an explanatory process, then number three is what the truth is, and that is design. Did an intelligent agent cause it to happen? For example, we look at cars. No one would argue that cars are not designed. Yeah, they break down, but that's a process of the laws of thermodynamics, that everything wears out, breaks down, and ages with time. That's why old cars are worth so much money, especially when they're rebuilt, because you don't find many of them, because they're rare, because the thermodynamics say that everything in the universe is filled with entropy. The universe itself. Take this room. If we locked it up, came back in here in 50 years, it would be decayed, it would be worn out. Even our own bodies, right? Paul says the outer man is decaying away. All of us know about that process. When people say you aren't what you used to be, boy, some of us, we know about that, don't we? But the inner man is being renewed, okay? So there is a spiritual aspect that Paul mentioned, but what I'm pointing out is the universe is not going towards greater intelligence and greater design. It's wearing out, decaying, and waxing old. The opposite of the direction it should be going if evolution is true. So point number three, did an intelligent agent cause it to happen? Cars, computers, appliances, airplanes, all of these are examples that precise design had to occur to put those together. Now, we can apply this to nature and see, do we find particular organisms in nature that meet this concept of intelligent design? Is intelligent design true or just some kind of religious concept? As one evolutionist put it, is it creationism in a cheap tuxedo? Okay, so you jazzed it up a little bit and you made it, you put, creationism in a tuxedo, and you're trying to fool us again, you silly creationists. We defeated you guys once, and now we can defeat you again. Oh, really? Well, go on to YouTube and watch any of Dr. Duane Gish's debates with evolutionists. We'll see whom defeated who. It's a political thing. The only reason that evolution is prominent because it smothers all other views. Okay? And it has a religious aspect to it. There is lots and lots of information that suggests that. I've even heard of and seen cases of individuals worshiping fossils. Yeah, believe it or not. I mean, I know that sounds horrible. You talk about idols, that's the ultimate in idols. All right, let's move on. A lot more information to cover. So now, Wow, every one of the slides are good now. It's only the first few.
It's evolving up.
There you go. See, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should.
The ball rolls up there.
Wait, well, I'm ahead. See, okay. So the Neo-Darwinian model of evolution has a number of particular aspects. Evolution is defined in different ways. These first couple of definitions, that's not what we're talking about. This is what you call bait and switch idea, because there's many definitions of evolution. So if you raise your hand in a class, even if it's a graduate class, and you say, but wait a minute, that's not evolution. Oh, yes, it is. The professor will stand up there and say, we see evolution happen every day. It's simply change over time. Who would ever disagree with change over time? Everything changes over time. That is not in dispute. Microevolution, or small-scale change within existing species, this also is not in dispute. We see varieties of dogs, varieties of cats, varieties of horses, frogs, cows, whatever you want to name. Darwin's finches is a classic example that is in every textbook that you see. It simply shows variation and variety in the beaks of finches. And they say, oh, look, evolution is a fact, it's documented, evolution in action. The textbooks that Mr. Bruss and I use at school show Darwin's finches, don't they? They show things like that, and they say, see, you can see for yourself, evolution in action. And if you raise your hand and you protest, you say, wait a minute, all you've done is show variational oscillations in the beaks of these finches. Exactly. And not only does the oscillation occur, when you get certain months of the year, certain beaked finches cannot get it to the hard seeds, and they tend to be selected against. But then as soon as you get enough rain and there's plenty of seeds, then the ones with those beaks come right back. Right. So there's simply oscillation. Don't show me variety in finch beaks. That is not what I'm talking about. I want to know the origin of birds. Show me where birds evolved from. So let's go to definition of 3. That's really what we're talking about under the third point, point C, macroevolution, large-scale change, and the change must be vertical. So, in this case, evolutionists would define that as descent with modification. For example, Darwin's tree. Start the tree of life. You've all seen it 100 times. I don't even need to show it. Starts out as a simplistic portion of the tree where the roots are, and then it goes up, and you have different species evolving through time. So, natural selection acts on random mutations. We could say, you've heard this before probably, goo to zoo and then to you, or goo by way of the zoo to you, okay? And there's many ways you could rhyme that out. Or molecules to man is the best definition I like. It must be a vertical kind of change from simple to complex. It's a bait and switch though, because when they say we show evolution, they're showing this up here, or maybe this up here, micro variational change at the simple complex level. They are not showing point C, macroevolution. And if you must show how life has evolved from simple to complex, you must show macroevolutionary changes. Okay? So keep that in mind, because if you talk to an evolutionist, the first thing they'll tell you is, look, we see evolution all over the place. Look at the peppered moth. Look at Darwin's finches. Examples of micro variational change, not macro molecules to men change. That's really the issue, okay? Now, let's go to the next slide. The Neo-Darwinian model of evolution continued. In fact, materialism is based on the quote, fact of evolution. Is evolution an absolute fact? Well, some think so. For example, Richard Dawkins, here's what he says, and I like to quote Dawkins because he's so radical and says some crazy things, and you'll see that through the course of the talk here. Evolution is a fact, he says. Beyond reasonable doubt, beyond serious doubt, beyond sane, informed, intelligent doubt, beyond doubt, evolution is a fact. The evidence for evolution is at least as strong as the evidence for the Holocaust. Okay, so in other words, if you don't believe in evolution, there's something really wrong with you. It is absolutely safe to say, he goes on to say, that if you meet somebody, right here, that claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane. I don't know which I am, maybe all three, I don't know. or wicked, but I'd rather not consider that. Isn't it interesting that Dr. Dawkins has his own set of morality where he chooses who's good and who's evil? But if evolution is true, there is no such thing as good and evil because there's no such thing as sin. So how could someone be wicked if there's no God? He cannot be. You see the point? The problem is morality starts with a creator because he's the one that sets the laws and the rules, and he's the one that tells every man in his own heart. Romans chapter 2 says, it's written on our hearts. But Dawkins says those people are wicked. Well, how's that possible? It can't be unless there's a creator. But if there's a creator, he says he's the one that made all this, and Dawkins is wrong. So he's really contradicting himself. Look at Dobzhansky way back in '73. He said, nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. Well, yeah, if you only consider evolution. So you got to wonder, why do these guys only believe in evolution? Why are they not willing to look at any other evidence? The answer, because that's what they were taught. If I grow up in communist Russia and the only thing I hear is, communism is good, communism is good, capitalism is bad, capitalism is bad. Well, I've never experienced capitalism, but I'm going to think and believe that they're correct because that's the only thing that I've ever heard. What's that proverb where it says something like, one man speaks and thinks he's right, and then the other speaks and he's proven wrong, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. They're only hearing and looking at one side of the data, and then they censor the other side so that nobody ever even knows that there's evidence against evolution. Okay, we're going to move on. Now, the neo-Darwinian model has as its basis natural selection. Nature selects traits, physical characteristics, which enhance the survival of the organism. Those that are the most fit or adapted to a particular environment pass their genes successfully. By this way, life is said to evolve. But that sounds so correct and accurate. But which ones are the most fit? Well, those that survive. Which ones are survive? Oh, of course, the ones that are the most fit. And fitness can be anything. It could be because you're tall or big, you survive, or because you're tiny, you survive. Because you're able to eat certain kinds of things, or because you're not able to eat certain kinds of things. Fitness covers everything. So really it conveys no information. It's what you call a tautology. But there does seem to be some evidence for natural selection, but it's not what it's proposed to be. Thus, through a process of descent with modification, new traits are thought to be randomly produced. Nature then decides which of these traits to keep, causing organisms to be more fit. Notice they have to say nature, because you cannot be bringing in a supernatural creator. Positive traits add up over generations, whereas negative traits get discarded. Okay? I'm not going to use this anymore, so let's close it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So far, we're looking at what they say natural, or I should say neo-Darwinianism. We can say that survival of the fittest is what's coined here by Herbert Spencer. That sums up what natural selection means. It's survival of the fittest. But which ones are the fittest? Again, those that survive. How do you know what fitness actually is? Because it can be anything. Therefore, Darwinism is a universal asset, according to Daniel Dennett, that eats through just about every traditional concept. In other words, he's talking about creation, and leaves in its wake a revolutionized worldview with most of the old landmarks still recognizable but transformed in a fundamental way. What is that transformation from theism to atheism is really what he means. Okay, let's move on. Now, the neo-Darwinian model has as its trait natural selection, so members of a population have variation. Some of that variation can help enhance and therefore be successful. We don't disagree with this. We see things like recombinant DNA, we see things like crossing over, and sexual transmission of genes for variation. There is variation, okay? Many more offspring are produced than actually survive, according to Thomas Malthus. That was, Darwin borrowed that from him. The excessive number of individuals cause a shortage of specific resources. Therefore, the variation among individuals allows certain individuals greater survivalship. So they are able to, certain organisms adapt, Other ones do not, according to this. As time passes, individuals with favorable variation will increase because they're supposedly better adapted, and they survive. The ones that don't, they will decrease and become extinct. Some of this I have no problem with, but does that lead to macroevolution from molecules to men? So let's look at a critique of natural selection. Okay, and I shouldn't have closed this because this has the correct format on it. Okay, so natural selection, first of all, you can't read that very well, but natural selection, it says, does not equal evolution. We do see organisms adapting to fitness of their environment, and the ones that are better adapted will tend to survive. But the question is that molecules to man evolution? The answer, no, it is not. Selection, yes. Evolution, no. Okay? Natural selection may explain the survival of the fittest, but look at this. It cannot explain the arrival of the fittest. What do I mean by that? Well, evolution has to have something to select from. Where did the material that it selects from come from? What is the origin of the information content? Because Darwin thought he explained everything. What he never explained was how organisms arrive. Where does that raw DNA material come from that selection works on? Evolution has never explained that, and it never will. So, for example, it cannot account for the origin of matter. Evolution cannot account for the origin of matter, and yet we know the universe had a beginning. It cannot account for the origin of life, and yet we know life must have come into existence. For everything that is created has a cause. That ultimate cause we think, of course, is the Creator. And then people say, well, you say God created everything. Who created God? Okay, the answer to that is no one created God. In Hebrews it says God is the same, Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is not a created being. He is eternal. That's why He's God and we are not. We are not eternal, but He is. So He had not a beginning. Natural selection works well as an editor. Once the material's there, yeah, you can get microvariational changes, but you cannot, it does not and has not account as being the author. Okay, now, the concept of natural selection was actually described, believe it or not, by a creationist. It was Edwin Blythe that actually came up with this some 25 years before Darwin published and took credit for the whole idea. He's not an originator. In fact, everything that Darwin argued was borrowed from other people, from Malthus, or from Edwin Blythe and many others, from his grandfather who had written a book a long time before Charles Darwin did. And Darwin didn't originate any of this stuff, but what Blythe said is, look, this phenomenon of natural selection is a conservative mechanism that came from the providence of a wise creator and allowed organisms to adapt to different environments. That is not evolution. So natural selection explains nothing because it doesn't explain the origin of life, the origin of matter, or the origin of DNA for that matter. It cannot and has not explained any of these things, whereas creation and intelligent design do have a good explanation for those causes. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, continuing on in our critique, natural selection has no inventive power. It can't invent anything. It cannot create, it can only select from trace characteristics that already exist. Therefore, it cannot explain the origin of living systems. And anyone that says it does is just wrong. They're wrong about that. Natural selection never adds new information. Information in the genome, our entire set of 20,000+ genes, the RNA and DNA that we have in every living thing, can be conserved but never gained. We never have this leap of mutations that produce new and novel things. That just does not happen. Dr. Douglas Axe, has pointed out that nothing can evolve unless it already exists. But that's a problem, that's a quandary, because natural selection happens only after cells are arranged in ways that work to keep the organism alive. So selection can hardly be the cause of these remarkable arrangements. It